Hi there, everyone. Welcome to the Agent Economy. Got a special episode this week. We have Alex Taylor joining us from Blankspace. This is our first guest slot. I think it's going to be the first of many. Alex, great to see you. Thanks for being on here.
No, not at all. Thank you very much for having me.
Really excited to get into it, to hear a bit more about Blankspace. But before we do, it'd be great to hear your backgrounds. How did you get into entrepreneurship? How did you become, obviously, founder of Blankspace? And then obviously tell us a bit about the company and what you do.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, no, well, thank you very much for having me. My background has very much been ad tech, programmatic advertising. I've done that for probably like 10 years now, and very much focused around like building marketplaces at a number of different ad tech startups. Met my co-founder, previous startup we were working at, called a company called Picnic. He was head of engineering, was head of partnerships. Basically, we built really cool product, which was processing over like a billion live publisher data points every single month, and running a significant amount of ad revenue through that particular platform, working with all the top global advertising. At the beginning of last year, we basically saw an opportunity where we were like, right, you know what? I think we should jump for this. And to be honest, it was to do with the video ecosystem. It was very much looking at publishers thinking and content creators, and is there an opportunity there to license this video content to publishers in order for them to run more pre-roll advertising? And I think we ran at that for probably 5 months and kept on hitting walls. And the main blocker consistently with all of these publishers was like, look, great, you're bringing me a new ad product, and yes, you can bring me more revenue. But at this point in time, the thing that is killing us is our organic traffic is dropping off a cliff. And we just like, yes, having another ad unit is great, but we just don't have the scale anymore. And so there is just no value to that. And you can put in hard minimums and this, that, the other, but it's just not going to work. And so we kind of went back to all of them, repivoted basically, and looked at the space of, well, how do you monetize these agents that are now taking all of this content from their site and all these bots? And so very briefly, I ended up joining an incubator called Antler, went through their incubator program, very much focused on this particular problem, got funding from those guys, and have been building Blankspace since September now, centered around building advertising infrastructure for what we call these live search agents. So users using an LLM to go do product or brand discovery, and it's sending its bots off across the internet to go collect that information and form that answer. And so how, for a publisher, can you track these things and then actually monetize them at point of request? So that's a very brief synopsis of where we've come from and how we basically got here.
Alex, sounds like to me, so you're solving for like the zero click problem that publishers are facing, right? That's the challenge right now, which is people search for things, they don't go through to the publisher websites because the information is being summarized for them, the answers being given to them there, and you're bringing something to the table that helps the publishers who were previously generating revenue from the traffic that was coming and the advertising that they were being shown in a different way. Is that, have I understood it correctly?
Yes, exactly. Well, 100% spot on there. And it is the case of like, these guys are being killed at the moment, or have been over the last 18 months. I know it's been very well documented to date. And I think we looked at the solutions that were coming out at that point in time, early sort of September or August last year. And lots of people have been talking about the licensing model and how can you block these bots and then take that next step of actually selling them a small fee or an access fee to come collect that information and train on that data. And like a huge amount of content out on the internet, I just don't believe holds the relevant value from a training purpose. Whereas the actual value is sitting very much around the advertising piece and recommendations. And so that's kind of how we I guess, this idea was born.
Really interesting, because I think it's also true at the moment that there's a challenge with publishers where, they'll want to block bots for a bunch of the content, but equally there'll be other parts of the site that they do want the bots to come to and to read and parse and get. And so you end up with this weird situation where like half the site, they're trying to block them and stop them. And the other half of the site, they're trying to let them come and pull the information. And I think it just ends up, I'm not super technical, but it ends up like this real messy soup of like code and blocking and things that do and don't work. And it's breaking quite a lot for people at the moment. So it's not that current like setup isn't a very good one, and actually finding new solutions like yours I think is super smart way of doing it. I remember I did a talk about 12 months ago to a group of CPG people about what was going on in AI search, and I flagged that, in the publishing world, this is really like the canary in the coal mine. It's the first place where everything's getting nuked and things are changing super fast. And that might come to retail and e-commerce as well. Like we don't quite know how that's all gonna evolve, but really interesting that Blankspace you're building and you're coming up with a solution to that, which will allow the publishers to continue to monetize. I'm super interested to see how that plays out, and then like what that monetization looks like. And without jumping around too many different topics, like I also heard that crypto is going to have like a resurgence because of all of these interactions with bots, because it potentially is like a way for those transactions to happen. Like, is that something you're looking at? Like, how does it work at the moment without having to give away too much detail about the secret sauce behind Blankspace?
Yeah, I think yes, I can see the obviously crypto element. I think the micro payments has been something that is massively pushed at the moment. From our perspective, we're running things like a programmatic ecosystem, like a programmatic auction. Everything is, I guess, cleared at that point in time, but money isn't transferred at that point in time. It's a case of we will reconcile all of the different auctions that have taken place across that month and then pay out to the publisher from the ad revenue that we've collected for them, if that makes sense.
Got you. Yes. So actually, like the sort of more traditional way of doing the payments at the moment.
Exactly. It's definitely, we aren't trying to, I think, obviously there's a speed element associated with a lot of this. I guess for a user, a typical human going on a website, they are quite lenient in the amount of speed that you can take in order to run a lot of this advertising, and a second or two isn't too bad. Whereas for a lot of these agents, when we're delivering our form of advertising, everything is done within sort of, I think it's between 28 and 35 milliseconds at the moment. So it's rapid, very, very, very quick. And trying to add any further latency into that. So like trying to, I don't know, process all of those payments. I'm aware, obviously, crypto can be extremely quick, but it's just another piece that we just...
Latency into it. Yeah, and then they're more likely maybe to go somewhere else and get the information from somewhere else, right? If you don't have the speed. Okay,
no, exactly.
That is super interesting.
And it's been interesting just learning a lot more about these bots, about this ecosystem, what's going on, what isn't going on. I think your point earlier on publishers trying to work out, well, do they block, do they not block, what do they do? One publisher, one of the biggest in the UK, decided just to block everything and ended up blocking all of their bots, which led to all of their advertising revenue just collapsed.
Just vaporized the traffic.
Destroyed it all, and then slowly came back from that, and we're like, okay, cool, these ones are good, these ones are bad, these ones. And yeah, I think from a publisher, it's hugely challenging at the moment of how do they navigate a lot of this. And yeah,
that was going to be one of my questions. What is the like general consensus amongst publishers around large language models, this move to AI search? Doom and gloom? Is there a lot of negativity in the market with the publishers, or are they looking at this as like innovation, an opportunity to really pivot the business model?
I think in general, sadly, it is a lot of doom and gloom initially. I think people have started to come out of that and decide, you know what, this is an opportunity to do things differently. They've obviously been burnt many, many times across the years by big tech. And so it's very much like, can we learn from what's happened in the past and take our own path now? I would say the UK market is definitely more risk averse than the US market and other markets that we've been exploring in testing new products, putting it out there, see what works, see what doesn't work. When like the interesting thing from different types of publishers, I think up at the big boys of the world, your Hearsts, your Futures, etc., I think have been leaning into this quite significantly. And I think if G2 is an example from a B2B perspective, these guys have recognized their influence over these LLMs and recognized their content has that power. And so how do you sell these packages into brands at the moment and say, look, you need to be on our platform, because if you want to be recognized in an LLM, you have to be there. And then secondly, look, if you pay us a bit more, we will prioritize you within that stack to make sure that you're being mentioned versus another brand. And
absolutely.
Yeah,
because we
productize that.
We know, Chris, don't we, from the work that we do, that digital PR piece can be incredibly influential in terms of the answers that the LLMs are giving and the recommendations that are being made. So for brands and for services who want to be recommended by the models, outreach to those platforms, to those publishers, getting the content listed the way that you want it to, like is a strategic priority. And I can totally imagine that these publishers will then find a way to monetize that. It just seems like quite early on in figuring out what the value prop is there and like how much they should be charging for doing those things. And I know that's not entirely new. I know that, you know, you can go pay for PR previously, but I think the game's changed quite a lot with how the LLMs are then passing that information and then using it to make the recommendations. One quick question for you, Alex, just staying on that theme of, you know, like who's doing what within the space. I always wondered whether there's like this weird game theory thing going to happen where, like, if you are a failing publisher, like you've almost got nothing to lose, but just to let the bots come and get everything on your site and like have everything because you're already on your way out. And then that all of a sudden leads you to be like the most cited source because you've free access to everything. And you kind of have this like final Hail Mary of like, can we make this work versus the big guys who obviously going to be way more cautious about it. And I just wonder whether, you know, that's something that you could see potentially playing out. It sounds like maybe not, because you said the big guys actually leaning into this quite heavily.
We've got a publisher within our network at the moment who's gone for the Hail Mary approach.
Okay.
And they've gone for an approach which is, okay, cool. People are accessing all of my information through these LLMs and I'm valuable there. My organic traffic is massively declining and therefore ad revenue is dropping off a cliff. And I'm stuffing more ads into that ecosystem, making the user experience worse and worse and worse for the people on site because I need to make the revenue in order to pay the bills. And so their strategy that they've gone for is actually, let's wipe all advertising off the human experience. Let's give humans the best experience possible and try and shift to a subscriber-based model and actually produce more premium content, get people to pay us for access there, but make sure that the experience that they're having on site is one of the best out there, and then monetize everything else through this agent economy. And how do you do the licensing piece for the LLM, as well as run forms of advertising that is influencing these LLMs? So you're basically saying, I've got a load of traffic over here that I'm just doing nothing with. And for this particular publisher, they've got 10 times the amount of live search agent traffic than they do human traffic now.
Wow.
Because they've just lent so hard into it. They're producing a lot more content, but then a lot more content that is relevant to, I guess, the grounding queries and prompts that people are trying to search within these LLMs. So they've captured this unique part of the market, this niche, while actually building a much better user experience for their users. So it's been a fascinating experience to like be a part of and witness. We're obviously at the very early stage of, well, how are you monetizing these agents at the same level that you were from a human perspective? And it still only is a handful of percentage points compared to what they were doing. But the expectation is that they're going to be able to get out the other side.
So they've killed the advertising business, but just adapted it into other formats like content creation, fiber-based. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I think that's interesting. I think that's a smart play.
Yeah, because also it kind of reconciles a bit with some data I've seen just recently about how like ad inventory supply is declining, presumably because the organic traffic to these places is falling, and therefore actually costs are going up because there's less inventory to sell, and there's still the same demand from advertisers, which I guess is kind of connects through to what I guess they've been seeing with that fall off on organic, but they've gone, okay, we're out of this market now. We're going to go pivot somewhere else and monetize in a different way. And I just wonder how that's going to play out across the whole ecosystem. I guess in my mind, there has to be a way to monetize the bots, which is exactly what you're doing, Alex. So it feels like you're standing in the right place to pick up a load of cash that gets flushed through the ecosystem in a different way.
So on that point, tell us a bit about the economics. You're obviously like tracking, I'm guessing, log level data. So you're seeing the bots coming through to a publisher site. How do you like package that up for a brand, for a publisher? And what does that kind of economic model look like for you guys and for the publisher?
So the first thing that we recognized quite quickly, and I think was a huge leap, was advertisers care about people. They don't care about bots. And so how do you map bots back to people, basically? And that was like the first quite significant challenge that we needed to work out. At the same time, can you actually influence these bots at point of request and seed information? And does that work for the brand? So what we do is we've purely focused on what we call a live search agent. So we don't do anything from a training bot perspective or search crawler or anything like that. We just look at these agents which have high levels of intent. They're using like RAG retrieval to get that information at point of request. And what we've seen are what we call like co-retrieval patterns. So this is, I think, again, it's been well documented that on like ChatGPT, they use fan out queries. In this case, it's making multiple different searches, utilizing that same agent to go collect that information, and we can recognize that agent across our network, all through obviously logs. And what we do is we look at, well, where have we seen that similar pattern elsewhere? And so we have access to a load of different third-party databases of real prompts, real answers, real citations. And can we predictively work out, well, what's the intent behind that bot? What are they actually looking for? Who is the kind of person behind it? And package each visit up into an audience category and sell that into the advertiser. That obviously helps us understand the value of each one of these visits based on the level of intent, where they are in the funnel, and what they're particularly looking for. Then obviously quantity within the marketplace is very much just looking at the logs. What are they taking, when, how often, etc. And so that's been like the main process in which we've been working to understand the economics of it. When it comes to actually buying, there's a massive challenge, and I don't think it's going to be one that's easily fixed, of the attribution layer between, cool, you've shown that my brand is now getting mentioned a lot more, but what's that done for my sales? What's that done for my traffic, et cetera, which I know generally the GEO industry or an AEO industry is working very hard at trying to validate. But what that means for us is we're not in a place where we can run performance-based advertising. It is very much just brand-based advertising at the moment, therefore paying on like a CPM-based basis, something quite classic, simple initially, just for the amount of impressions that you're serving to these to these live search agents. And then we show uplift of brand mentions off the back of those adverts.
Nice, interesting. Yeah, amazing. I mean, it makes complete sense, obviously, with the bot traffic. I think it's just surpassed human traffic for the first time ever, right? There's more bots coming to websites now than humans, which is pretty wild to think about.
It ticked over 50%, didn't it?
Yeah, crazy.
Which I think, to be honest, I think it's been there for a while.
Maybe, yeah.
I think they just haven't wanted to flag it.
Yeah. I saw some really interesting studies. I think it was from Ramp, actually, they were starting to do some specific incentives for bots alone. I don't know whether you guys saw the study.
Did.
It was, instead of marketing to humans, they were basically marketing specific promotions to the bots coming to site to see what the impact was having on recommendations in Claude, ChatGPT to the end user. And it was fascinating to see that dynamic for the first time ever, really, like marketing specifically to the machine first.
Yeah.
But it started to pull through and actually started to get picked up in these recommendations. And then that was pulling through to the end user eventually. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that as well, like specific incentives. But obviously early days.
Early days. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because it's a bit like cloaking on a website. You know, like you have the content that humans can see, and then you've got the stuff that's like readable by the bots. And in theory, you know, those two things are probably very similar, maybe with a few small tweaks, but actually having something different for the bots and versus the humans. I get the argument for it, but like if you're like, hey, here's a massive incentive if the bots come and like buy the product service, but actually like if a human comes, then you know, the price is really high up here, and then we start to get into the world. You know, I think about like CPG, like the world of e-commerce like brought loads of price transparency for consumers, right? Which I think was a good thing. Made it really complicated for brands, but like it was a good thing for consumers in general. And I just see us heading straight into a new place of like the price transparency just fully disappears. Everything's like really hidden. And I did originally think that the AI search would help people find better prices and have that transparency. But you're less certain about that when I
think there's a big cleanup that's happening at the moment with regard to misinformation on the web, because it's obviously pulling from multiple sources. Whereas before obviously the end point was the website, right? Now we're pulling from Reddit, YouTube, LinkedIn.
Well, so maybe here we end up with like informational transparency. Like all the you get to like really find out whether the product works or not. But in terms of like, are you getting the best price? Who knows? Maybe the bot's getting incentivized or not. You just don't know.
But do you think people are going to allow agents to negotiate on their behalf?
That's the super interesting question. I think we're a long way from that, but I mean, a good example, we always we're getting recommended in Claude to use certain technologies, and I can see a world where we end up with agentic workflows between agents happening. But again, it comes down to that price transparency. What are the incentives for those agents? We're not there yet, but
no, I can see like if you're in B2B, like maybe getting some tooling for your business. You've set a task to an AI agent to go build something or help you create or find a solution, and in part of that process is to buy a piece of tech that would work for the solution. I can totally see that being like delegated. less sure about humans delegating like consumer purchases that they might make, because I guess the point at which the negotiation is material is normally on high ticket items, and I think humans are going to be quite invested in wanting to be involved in that process. But we're seeing it already on Amazon with the price alerts and buy for me at set prices coming along. So I mean, I know that's not a negotiation, but essentially you can say to Rufus or Alexa for shopping, hey, when this item hits this price, just buy it for me, which is sort of like, I guess, one step towards that delegation to the bots to do the negotiation.
I'm aware that we're going probably a bit off tangent, but does Amazon have access to that data?
Yes. So, I mean, I've been in the room with people from Amazon. I've been at talks talking about this, and if you think about, if you fast forward that situation, let's say, for example, what's the product? Like, I bought an extension cable the other day, yesterday, right? Went on, I was like, fine, that one, 20 quid. I should have checked the price history. If I did, and I saw that it was always at £15 instead of £20, and I wasn't in a rush to get the item, I could have said to it, hey, like, when it's at 15 again, just like buy it for me and ship it, right? And so if you imagine that 10,000 people had done that, and so Amazon knows, hey, this item is at $19.99, but we've got 10,000 price limit orders essentially at 15, they can go to the brand or the supplier and say, hey man, like, do you want these orders? Because if you do, just like drop your price by 5 quid and you can have 10,000 units that will ship instantly. And, you know, they'll also have a view on inventory and whether that's possible or not. So they'll start to really understand the price elasticity of items from it. And I think they'll try and monetize that. So I think they'll come to brands and say, hey, we can sell you 10,000 units at this price today. By the way, you also need to pay us a fee for facilitating that if you want that to happen. And it's going to be really interesting because then brands won't they won't have to put a live promotion that everyone will see. They'll just do it in the background, like in sort of almost like a gray discount market. So that for me is like, could really like scale out massively. And it's not a million miles away there's been some attempts to do this in Europe. I think it works quite well in China, but like this idea of doing like MOQ orders. They're like, hey, if enough people commit to this product at this price, we can get it manufactured and made and it can ship. And I think that's quite big in Asia, but we don't have it in Europe. And it's kind of the same thing, but just coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, which is the product's already available, but people are just saying the price that they're willing to pay for it. Yeah, I think it's going to be quite a big thing.
No, I think it's very interesting, especially on the point of like I guess your human experience at the moment. So much on Amazon is sponsored. As soon as you obviously search, it's just going down, sponsored. In the same way from a Google search perspective. Yeah. Again, it's like, yes, so cool. If you're the top link, you're probably right at the bottom of the page at the moment on the first page. And like, if there are other means in order to remove those types of user experiences and monetize elsewhere, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's a great time for brands and people setting up brands right now, because you probably can win organically with the AI search piece in ways that, up until now it's just a massive paid play that you had to cough up and pay to get the visibility. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time. Alex, I've got some other questions for you that I'm super interested to know about, because you said when we were talking before the pod that yourself and your co-founders on the technical side of things as the CTO, and like obviously Chris and I, non-technical, but we're building things with AI. Like, you've got ad tech. Like, how are you building that ad tech with AI? Like, what tools are you using? Like, is that accelerating the speed that you can take things to market? I assume that it is. Like, what can you tell us about that?
We're doing a lot. I think like we went through. I'd never done an incubator. I'd never gone through an accelerator or anything like that. We joined Antler in September last year, and that was a very intense process. Is probably the best way of putting it. It's like a combination of Love Island meets The Apprentice. It's like 100 and something people in a room, all trying to find a co-founder, all trying to then smash ideas together, come up with business, get traction as quickly as possible. And luckily, like, I went in with Harry, both had worked together for 5 years at that point in time, knew each other very, very well, had obviously tried to do the video products prior to that. And I think we both very much had the mindset of how can we maximize the use of these tools to make sure that we don't need to hire very, very quickly. Sure. And we take the initial capital that we've got from Antler and extend that out as much as possible using these tools. So it's been very much a case of this kind of AI first approach for the company. How can how can you basically have your domain expert within the business and then have something like Claude, Gemini, etc., execute a lot of what they want done. So we've built firstly like a internal MCP server that connects into all of our, I guess, into our brand brain in a sense.
Yep.
That we use Granola, we use Attio, and a number of other tools to basically obviously track all meetings, track customers, emails, etc. Pump that all into one single repository, and then pluck out some core facts around the business. What is true? What isn't true? What's sales fluff probably versus what's actually accurate? And then how does that then inform product decisions, form marketing, reach, etc.? And us having like the internal MCP just means that I can very easily with say Claude just query state of the business, the financial state, runway, etc., as well as where customers at, and then go and say, look, can you go now execute on XYZ? And Claude will go off and do that. So it's been very much that first approach. There have been a lot of issues with that. For instance, my Claude thinks something completely different or interprets something completely different to Harry's Claude.
Interesting.
Definitely from a design perspective and a front end perspective, we've had a lot of challenges there. And then taking the time to basically rebuild a complete design suite and build out certain components so that we make sure the front end does work. Yeah. There's a lot that has gone in to learning how best to use a lot of these tools.
Yep.
We have, I guess, to the point right now, maximize as many credits as possible. We're definitely overexposed on utilizing Claude versus many other LLMs.
Obviously, we've taken the same approach at Blackbird. Before hiring, do you do a bit of an analysis ahead of time and just think, can we automate this through agentic workflows before we hire? Like, do you go through that thought process, like AI first before bringing in individuals?
Yes, we do. I would say what's really dangerous with some of that approach is you end up doing everything because everything seems so possible. And then it's trying to work out like where can you give away your Legos in a sense and actually say, you know what, let's get a contractor in to help with XYZ and just, we've got capital. That capital is there to try and make us move faster and help us move faster. And that's one of the ways. We definitely have gone into a number of traps where that isn't the case and you're down a rabbit hole and you're spending way too much time trying to build that particular thing or fix that particular thing when you should just be focusing on the product.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Totally with you on that. Like it's like the challenge of figuring out when to delegate, like pre-AI anyway, right? Was like, okay, cool. We should get someone on board. We can delegate this to them. It just seems so easy to delegate everything to AI now that it's almost like the default option is like, well, I'll just get Claude to do it because it's going to be faster and easier than asking a human to do it. But I think where I need to get my mindset to is, well, actually, if I hire someone who's AI native, who uses Claude super well, then they're going to be able to do all of the stuff that I'm trying to do, but like, I'm going to 2x myself or even maybe more by having that person on the team doing it for me. So I think I'm finding it quite challenging actually to push myself towards hiring people because it's so easy to delegate stuff to Claude, but I just need to get my head around the fact that, well, if I hire them, then, they'll also use Claude and in theory should be as productive or maybe even more productive than I could be.
The challenge is like, how do you actually plug them into your existing ecosystem?
Well, exactly. Yeah. I'm going to go through an exercise in the next couple of weeks. So I bought a new laptop, going to set up a new instance of Claude. I've been because it's just me and a couple of contractors at the moment. I've been using just like my own, like Pro Max version of Claude. I'm going to get a new laptop. I'm going to set it up as a business license so that everyone can get access to the same things. I'm going to move a whole bunch of stuff that's on my laptop to the cloud. I mean, I'm not as advanced as how you've done your setup, Alex, but similar things in terms of having like the business brain and queryable. And I think what's one really interesting thing about LLMs just in general, right? They're fantastic at understanding and manipulating and organizing unstructured data. But the challenge is when they have that unstructured data, they can, go in different directions, like you've seen with your co-founder and then maybe recommendations of different Claude instances. But if they have like really stable, organized, well-structured data to read from, then actually they generally come to similar kind of answers for things, I think. So it's about building that like internal brain infrastructure in a way that just means that you're going to get this sort of consistent level of responses from the models. Actually, one other comment, is I guess we're probably all using Claude because it's the best model that's been out for a while. And with some other people, like you've been sort of throwing shade on Copilot and how painful it is to use Copilot. I do use it, have used it in previous employment. I've actually got on an events business that I've got a setup for Copilot. The amazing thing there, though, these large businesses, like they have an insane amount of data. Excel files, all in SharePoint, all accessible by Copilot. So all of a sudden, Copilot could become very powerful plugging into all those things. No one files stuff in the same way everywhere. No one names stuff the right way. Nothing like all this stuff is like really heavily unstructured, whatever. So you got these large organizations all of a sudden empowering people to search through the whole SharePoint database to find information about things. And I can imagine that everyone's Copilot will be telling them a different thing to do as a result, which is going to be kind of wild, I think.
No, exactly. Agreed.
There's been some great examples. We actually covered it last episode, Stephen, on Brain Labs, like creating repeatable skills within Claude, just to get that consistency across the organization. But I think us three are in the sweet spot, really, because we started at obviously last year. We're not having to like basically get rid of old processes. We can start very much from an AI native perspective and hit the ground running. Whereas these legacy organizations just got thousands of people, thousands of documents. It's a much bigger challenge.
And I'd have to say, I definitely commend my co-founder, Harry, on being very much the organized one and building out that architecture. I think exactly like you say, Stephen, of like making sure that everything is put into the right category, everything is filed in the right way. It just makes life so much easier for these LLMs in order to collect that information, understand it, and then put it back in the right place as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's definitely like a technical mindset. Like if you've written a lot of code in the past, like you always would have organized yourself in that kind of way. That's not who I am. Like I'm not a coder, so like I'm having to learn that skill set rapidly.
Yeah. No, and I think, the Antler team pushed us really hard on this particular point of just trying to make sure that you are as lean as possible for as long as possible and making sure that the business is built in that way. How can you get access to these tools as quickly as possible? And like we've got a great benefits program in order to get loads of credits for a lot of these things, which is fantastic. But it's just been, it's been a really interesting, I guess, thought experiment and then also experience of just going through.
Yeah, totally. And then can you say something a little bit about the models? You mentioned you're using Claude already, and I think you mentioned Gemini as well. Like, are you testing out different models? Like, have you tried the latest version of ChatGPT? Have you thought about Grok? Like, what's the thought process there and the AI models to use?
Mainly what we're using is Claude and ChatGPT. I would say from a Claude perspective, we went down the Fable route for a bit. We were like, you know what, we're going to go for this. We maxed everything out very, very quickly. It actually, I think we found that it thought for too long and its output was a little bit like not worth it in a sense. And so we do a huge amount just on Opus 4.8. Then with that, from an OpenAI perspective, we use the latest model of ChatGPT and that is a lot more for the product itself, what's going on from a processing perspective. Yes, we're going to try and find the time to explore with other models. I've never used Grok. I don't know if I need to in the same way. Like we've utilized Perplexity here and there, Perplexity Computer. But at this point in time, we've just found for the business itself and how the business operates, that Claude has been the best model to work on top of.
Sure. I just saw that. Sorry, the reason for mentioning Grok was I think I just saw that like it was winning on some of the metrics, and I got an email from this morning saying there's a new model out, and I was like, should I try that? I don't know.
Kimi 3's just come out, and it's like smashed some of the frontier models, and it's obviously open source, so maybe one to test as well. It's pretty impressive what they've brought out. I think the stock markets are a little bit concerned about it. Upcoming IPOs have been, I think the valuation's probably been halved overnight.
Wow.
Yeah, take a look. So obviously, like where you're at currently, you mentioned you've taken on funding. What do the next year, 2 years look like for you, Alex? Obviously, it's difficult to predict in this AI world, but tell us a bit about where you see Blankspace going, whether you're taking on more funding, hiring, like what are you looking to build out? Give us a kind of future state.
Yeah. So funding's actually happening more immediate. So that's actually over the next sort of 3-4 months. It's hopefully going to be closed, which we're very excited about. And
Awesome.
Andrew have introduced us to a load of investors, and that's going really, really well. So we're happy there. I think like moving into the future, we're very focused on particular verticals at this point in time. That is automotive, sportswear, and then B2B SaaS. And for a handful of different reasons based on the revenue streams within those businesses and how publishers capture revenue, and basically trying to prove out the value of our products within those verticals, then obviously move vertically within that. And then hopefully next step, I guess in sort of the 3-year time, is how do you expand horizontally? I would say I would love it if in 3 years' time we were working with content creators, not just your traditional publishers, that we were working with newsletters, podcast hosts, influencers to an extent, and helping them actually understand the value of their content within this LLM ecosystem and capture better brand deals for themselves and more significant revenues for themselves. I think that is something that we are building towards as we see these LLMs try and work out where is the trusted source of information. And so that's definitely a future that we're building towards. But at this point in time, it's get more funding, it's scale it as quickly as possible within this particular verticals that we're in, and ultimately prove to advertisers that this audience is relevant and that this audience you can advertise to efficiently. You don't need to, I guess, go directly into these LLM platforms and run native advertising. I think 100% that will be a strategy and will continue to grow, but showcase that actually the efficiency of your ad dollars can actually be spent actually buying content at point of request for these live search agents and get your brand in there, basically.
Nice. Yeah. Super interesting. Yeah. I think you're in a really interesting spot. And do you foresee, I know there was previously deals brokering between the LLMs and large publishers. Do you see more of that happening over the coming months and years, or do you think that's just not going to happen?
I was at an Amazon talk the other day, and I think it was PwC came on stage and they said, look, guys, there are going to be, I think it was 36 deals signed this year in the UK for real time access for information from publishers. The room must be full of maybe 200, 300 different publishers. And honestly, people laughed. People were like, well, I haven't heard of any of these deals. How is this going to be signed in the next 9 months, basically?
Yeah, okay.
And they got pushed quite hard on the question. And the people on stage just said, look, like, this is a model. This is what we've modeled out based on what we've seen historically, et cetera, et cetera. Where I'm going with it is I think the LLMs have been, and these frontier models have been very clever with the deals that they've negotiated and executed so far. They have done enough to try and, I guess, not have as much legal pressure on themselves. They've shown that they are cooperating. They are giving incentives out. I think Perplexity kicked things off with trying to do their share of subscription for Comet, I think it was, and they dish out a bit of revenue there. But like, you're talking half pennies, whatever, on the dollar. Like, when you look at the licensing deals at the moment, I think they represent 2% of these publishers' actual revenue. And so, yes, they sound massive, and you're talking about $100 million deals, but in relative terms to the size of these businesses, they're absolutely nothing at all. Legislation is moving through. The UK government trying to do their thing. The US government, like in New York, they've been announcing the changes there. I think you are going to see more of that upset. These publishers do have influence over government or have a voice into government and can lobby and push that way. But at the same time, these LLM models also have significant capital and cash to do the opposite. So yeah. I think we're going to end up in a world where, yes, some deals are going to be made. I just don't see it as their core revenue stream. I don't see it as enough value that these publishers are going to be able to survive at, like, the mid-tier, the top to mid-tier. I think the top publishers, yes, you're making deals, but anyone below that, you're in real trouble.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so diversification's key. I think, yeah, you're going to get pressure from the publishers, but then you've got some of these frontier models that are partly owned by the US government. There's going to be some backlash there as well. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic and see how it plays out over time. But I guess for publishers, like, it's a challenging market, but there are opportunities, and it sounds like you guys have a great solution in this space, which I think is the right way to go. I know we've been looking at, like, bot traffic, and obviously that's expanding. And if you're working with innovative publishers, I think this is like a great opportunity to, kind of build out that model for the agentic web. So yeah, I think you guys are in a really good spot. It's super interesting.
No, I appreciate it. No, we're very, very excited, and we're very bullish on it. We believe that, like, look, this is the core way that publishers are going to make revenue in the future, and it should be. From a human experience, it should get better across the web. That is one of our intentions. And then secondly, the agentic traffic, there is a lot of money to be made there. You just need to work out the value ultimately at this point. The first step is measurement, then it's executing.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I think
thank you very much, guys.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, great to have you on, Alex. So thank you very much for your time. And if you guys want to learn more about Blankspace, then we'll put some links in the description. And we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again, Alex.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.